A country childhood. Apart from life, a strong constitution and an abiding connection to the Thembu royal house. The only thing my father bestowed upon me at birth was the name Rolihala in Shoja. Rolihala literally means pulling the branch of a tree, but its colloquial meaning more accurately would be troublemaker. I do not believe that names are destiny or that my father somehow divined my future. But in later years, friends and relatives would ascribe to my birth name the many storms I have both caused and weathered. My more familiar English or Christian name was not given to me until my first day of school, but I am getting ahead of myself. I was born on 18 July 1980 at Muezo, a tiny village on the banks of the Mabashub River in the district of Umtata, the capital of the Transkei. The year of my birth marked the end of the Great War, the outbreak of an influenza epidemic that killed millions throughout the world, and the visit of a delegation of the African National Congress to the Versailles Peace Conference to voice the grievances of the African people of South Africa. Muezo, however, was a place apart, a tiny precinct removed from the world of great events, where life was lived much as it had been for hundreds of years. The Transkei is 800 miles east of Cape Town, 550 miles south of Johannesburg, and lies between the Kai River and the Natal border, between the rugged Drakensberg Mountains to the north and the blue waters of the Indian Ocean to the east. It is a beautiful country of rolling hills, fertile valleys, and 1,000 rivers and streams which keep the landscape green even in winter. The Transkei used to be one of the largest territorial divisions within South Africa, covering an area the size of Switzerland, with a population of about 3.5 million Xhosas and a tiny minority of Basothos and Whites. It is home to the Thembu people, who are part of the Xhosa nation, of which I am a member. My father, Gadla Henry Mepekhaniswa, was a chief by both blood and custom. He was confirmed as chief of Muezo by the king of the Thembu tribe, but under British rule, his selection had to be ratified by the government, which in Muezo took the form of the local magistrate. As a government appointed chief, he was eligible for a stipend as well as a portion of the fees the government levied on the community for vaccination of livestock and communal grazing land. Although the role of chief was a venerable and esteemed one, it had even 75 years ago become debased by the control of an unsympathetic white government. The Thembu tribe reaches back for 20 generations to King Ziwade. According to tradition, the Thembu people lived in the foothills of the Drakensberg Mountains and migrated toward the coast in the 16th century, where they were incorporated into the Xhosa nation. The Xhosa are part of the Nguni people who have lived, hunted, and fished in the rich and temperate southeastern region of South Africa, between the great interior plateau to the north and the Indian Ocean to the south, since at least the 11th century. The Nguni can be divided into a northern group, the Zulu and the Swazi people, and a southern group, which is made up of Amabeka, Amabomwana, Amaglekla, and together they comprise the Xhosa nation. The Xhosa are a proud and patrilineal people with an expressive and euphonious language and an abiding belief in the importance of laws, education, and courtesy. Xhosa society was a balanced and harmonious social order in which every individual knew his or her place. Each Xhosa belongs to a clan that traces its descent back to a specific forefather. I am a member of the Madiba clan, named after a Thembu chief who ruled in the Transkei in the 18th century. I am often addressed as Madiba, my clan name, as a sign of respect. Negu Ben Chuka, one of the greatest monarchs who united the Thembu tribe, died in 1832. As was the custom, he had wives from the principal royal houses, the Great House, from which the heir is selected, the right-hand house, and the Ziba, a minor house that is referred to by some as the left-hand house. It was the task of the sons of the Ziba or left hand house to settle royal disputes. Mithikrakra, the eldest son of the great house, succeeded Nijubengkuka, and among his sons were Negilesvi and Mantanzima. Sabata, who ruled the Thembu from 1954, was the grandson of a senior to Kelzer Dalivunga, better known as KD Mantanzima, the former chief minister of the Transkei, my nephew, by law and custom, who was a descendant of Matanzima. The eldest son of the Ziba house was Simakade, whose younger brother was Mandela, my grandfather. Although over the decades there have been many stories that I was in the line of succession to the Thembu throne, the simple genealogy I have just outlined exposes those tales as a myth. Although I was a member of the royal household, I was not among the privileged few who were trained for rule. Instead, as a descendant of the Ziba house, I was groomed, like my father before me, to counsel the rulers of the tribes. My father was a tall, dark-skinned man with a straight and stately posture, which I like to think I inherited. He had a tuft of white hair just above his forehead, and as a boy, I would take white ash and rub it into my hair in imitation of him. My father had a stern manner and did not spare the rod when disciplining his children. He could be exceedingly stubborn, another trait that may unfortunately have been passed down from father to son. My father has sometimes been referred to as the Prime Minister of Thembuland during the reigns of Delin Debo, the father of Sabata, who ruled in the early 1900s, and that of his son Jongging Dapa, who succeeded him. That is a misnomer in that no such title existed, but the role he played was not so different from what the designation implies. As a respected and valued counselor to both kings, he accompanied them on their travels and was usually to be found by their sides during important meetings with government officials. He was an acknowledged custodian of Zuza history, and it was partly for that reason that he was valued as an advisor. My own interest in history had early roots and was encouraged by my father. Although my father could neither read nor write, he was reputed to be an excellent orator who captivated his audiences by entertaining them as well as teaching them. In later years, I discovered that my father was not only an advisor to kings but a kingmaker. After the untimely death of Jongzilzwe in the 1920s, his son Sabata, the infant of the great wife, was too young to ascend to the throne. A dispute arose as to which of Dalin Debo's three most senior sons from other mothers, Joging Taba, Dabula Manzi, and Merithafa, should be selected to succeed him. My father was consulted and recommended Joging Taba on the ground that he was the best educated. Joging Taba, he argued, would not only be a fine custodian of the crown, but an excellent mentor to the young prince. My father and a few other influential chiefs had the great respect for education that is often present in those who are uneducated. The recommendation was controversial, for Joging Taba's mother was from a lesser house, but my father's choice was ultimately accepted by both the Thembus and the British government. In time, Joging Taba would return the favor in a way that my father could not then imagine. All told, my father had 4 wives, the third of whom, my mother, Nosikeni Feni, the daughter of Nikidama, from the Emapumu clan of the Zoza, belonged to the right-hand house. Each of these wives, the great wife, the right-hand wife, my mother, the left-hand wife, and the wife of the Ikadi or support house, had her own kraal. A kraal was a homestead and usually included a simple fenced-in enclosure for animals, fields for growing crops, and one or more thatched huts. The kraals of my father's wives were separated by many miles, and he commuted among them. In these travels, my father sired 13 children in all, 4 boys and 9 girls. I am the eldest child of the right-hand house, and the youngest of my father's 4 sons. I have 3 sisters, Belive, who was the oldest girl, Notenchu and Makutswana. Although the eldest of my father's son was Mahalwa, my father's heir as chief was Dalikwili. the son of the great house, who died in the early 1930s. All of his sons, with the exception of myself, are now deceased, and each was my senior not only in age but in status. When I was not much more than a newborn child, my father was involved in a dispute that deprived him of his chieftainship at Muzo and revealed a strain in his character I believed he passed on to his son. I maintain that nurture, rather than nature, is the primary molder of personality. But my father possessed a proud rebelliousness, a stubborn sense of fairness that I recognized in myself. As a chief or headman, as it was often known among the whites, my father was compelled to account for his stewardship, not only to the Thembu king, but to the local magistrate. One day, one of my father's subjects lodged a complaint against him involving an ox that had strayed from its owner. The magistrate accordingly sent a message ordering my father to appear before him. When my father received the summons, he sent back the following reply: Adizi Nistinkwala, I will not come. I am still girding for battle. One did not defy magistrates in those days. Such behavior would be regarded as the height of insolence, and in this case it was. My father's response bespoke his belief that the magistrate had no legitimate power over him. When it came to tribal matters, he was guided not by the laws of the King of England, but by Thembu custom. This defiance was not a fit of pique, but a matter of principle. He was asserting his traditional prerogative as a chief and was challenging the authority of the magistrate. When the magistrate received my father's response, he promptly charged him with insubordination. There was no inquiry or investigation that was reserved for white civil servants. The magistrate simply deposed my father, thus ending the Medela family chieftainship. I was unaware of these events at the time, but I was not unaffected. My father, who was a wealthy nobleman by the standards of his time, lost both his fortune and his title. He was deprived of most of his herd and land, and the revenue that came with them. Because of our straitened circumstances, my mother moved to Kuno, a slightly larger village north of Mezo, where she would have the support of friends and relations. We lived in a less grand style in Kunu, but it was in that village near Umtata that I spent some of the happiest years of my boyhood, and whence I trace my earliest memories.